Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Justin Haskins Show. My name is Justin Haskins. Today we're going to be talking about the filibuster. I know it sounds sounds a little bit boring, but the filibuster is one of the most important issues in America right now. Yes, it's true. It is. It is incredibly important, and people need to spend more time talking about it. And if you don't know what the filibuster is, that's okay. We're going to talk about that soon. But before we get into the topic, a quick call to action. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the subscription button, subscribe, and hit the little notifications button so that you make sure that you get notifications when new video posts. Leave a comment. All of these things are going to help more people see content like this, help this show, this channel break through big tech algorithms that hold content like this back. It doesn't cost any money, just a little bit of your time. So please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much in advance. Okay, the filibuster. Let's just get into what the filibuster is. And then I'm going to make my case for why the filibuster needs to end, why this is actually a really, really important topic. The filibuster is a rule that exists in the Senate that allows for a minority group within the Senate, usually this is along party lines, to effectively debate endlessly on legislation. And that by debating endlessly, you can kill legislation with a minority of voters, a minority of votes in the Senate. So if a group of senators get together and decide, you know what, we don't like this legislation, and we know that we don't have the votes to vote against it, we're just going to debate endlessly so that we never actually gets to the floor. All right. This is called the filibuster. It's been around for a very, very, very long time in American history. The filibuster started in the, technically, there was a rule, I believe it was in 1807, there was a rule removed in 1807 that effectively allowed the filibuster to come into existence, but basically nobody used the filibuster until the 1830s. I think the first time there was a real attempt to use the filibuster in the Senate was in 1837, if I remember right. And it had to do with a political controversy that was going on at the time. I think it involved Andrew Jackson. We don't need to get into all of that. But really, the filibuster was barely ever used for the first 60 or so years in American history, pre-Civil War. So really even more than that, around 70 years. No one used the filibuster. The Senate operated, with some exceptions, of course, as I already noted. The Senate operated as a majority rule body. So when legislation came to the Senate, for the most part, they voted with a simple majority and decided whether they were going to pass legislation or not. As the 1800s rolled along, post-Civil War, the filibuster became something that was used more frequently. And then in the 1900s, during the Progressive Era, it, as so many other things, bad ideas came into existence, the filibuster started becoming a more regular part of the American political system. And today it's used all the time, essentially. They don't even have to use it. Just the threat of the filibuster prevents legislation from ever getting a vote in the Senate. So most people don't know that. The average person walking down the street doesn't understand this. But in order to pass legislation in the Senate, you can't have just 50 or 51 votes. You have to have 60 votes in order to get legislation to a vote in the Senate. Now, there are exceptions to that. The exception to that is something called the budget reconciliation process. And this is another rule that was put into place in the Senate that allows some kinds of legislation related to spending and budgets and reducing deficits and things like that to move forward in the Senate with a simple majority. So instead of needing the 60 votes to end debate and therefore move the legislation forward, you can do it with a majority. But there are all these rules about what kinds of legislation you can pass, or what kinds of legislation you have in front of you in order to end the debate with a simple majority. So you can't do it with all kinds of legislation. You can only do it with certain kinds of legislation. Now, this is why we have these big omnibus, gigantic mammoth spending bills that's chock full of all this crazy stuff, and it's all jammed into one bill. The reason that they do that, this is one of the reasons they do it, is because that's one of the only ways to get things through the Senate. For the most part, the Senate doesn't allow anything to pass because we live in such a partisan period of American history that it's really hard to get 60 votes to agree on anything. Now, sometimes it does happen. There are times when you can get enough bipartisan support to end debate so that you can get a floor vote in the Senate, but it is extremely, extremely difficult to do. And so we have constant gridlock that occurs in the Senate. So this is something that's been going on for a very, very long time. It's increasingly getting worse and more problematic. We recently just had a government shutdown, the longest government shutdown in American history, and it occurred because Republicans, even though they controlled the White House, they controlled the House, and they controlled the Senate, they did not have enough votes in the Senate for a very long time to move legislation forward to end the government shutdown. They couldn't do it through the budget reconciliation process because of the rules that surround budget reconciliation. So they needed Democrats to cross the aisle. And eventually that happened, but it was only after people suffered through the longest government shutdown in history. It doesn't need to be like this, okay? We don't need to have this system that's like this, but this is the way that it is. And I'm going to make my argument for ending it. All right. I'm going to make my argument for ending it. I wrote an article recently for the Federalist, which is a really great website. If you're not familiar with the Federalist, you should check it out at thefederalist.com. And the article is called "Trump is Right. Senate Republicans should end the filibuster before it's too late." Not everybody agrees with me on this. I know that, but I really do think that this is one of the more important articles that I've written in a long time. So, the article leads off like this. In the midst of the recent historically long government shutdown, President Trump repeatedly called for Senate Republicans to end the filibuster, a long-standing legislative rule requiring 60 votes to cease debate on a bill. On November 7th alone, Trump posted 3 times to Truth Social, that's a social media company, urging Republicans to abolish the filibuster requirement so the Senate could end what was at the time the nation's longest-running government shutdown. Trump said, "If Republicans kill the filibuster, they sail to victory for many years to come. If they don't, disaster," in all caps, waiting to happen. So then on Sunday evening, 8 Senate Democrats broke with their party, agreeing to end the filibuster so Republicans could finally stop the government shutdown. But Trump's warning about the filibuster remains just as important today as it was during the shutdown. Note that if you want to end the filibuster, all you need is a simple majority. That's it. So a simple majority of Republicans can vote to change the rules of the Senate so that the filibuster ends. So you don't need 60 votes in the Senate to change the filibuster rule. You only need a majority. So Republicans could at any time change the rule to end the filibuster. Now, Republicans have done this in the past with Supreme Court justices, and Democrats have done this in the past with federal court appointees. But when it comes to other kinds of legislation, both sides have been totally unwilling to change the rules. It's often called ending the filibuster, is often called the nuclear option, because of the potential political fallout that would come from doing something like that. So why is it that people are so reluctant in the Senate to end the filibuster? The main reason they're reluctant to do it is simply, when you think about nuclear war, it's why they call it the nuclear option. If you end the filibuster and you pass the legislation that you want, the other side will come into power, and when they come into power, they're not going to have the filibuster, and they're going to do whatever they want too. Even if you put the filibuster back into place, they'll take the filibuster out when they come into power, and they'll do whatever they want. And this is extremely disconcerting to the minority party, because now more legislation is going to be passed, and you're not going to be able to stop, quote unquote, bad ideas, bad policy from coming into effect. That's the reason why a lot of people in Washington are unwilling to vote against the filibuster. It's seen as It's seen as a way of giving more power to the minority and making sure that legislation just isn't being passed constantly. Now, here's why I think that's a horrible, horrible, horrible idea from the perspective of a free market, limited government, pro-liberty guy. Here's why I think this is really bad and why I think Republicans should end the filibuster now, why Donald Trump is right about this. And although it is a big step, it is dramatic, it is going to set up the other side, the left, when they come into power, to do all kinds of things that I think are probably really bad for the country. I still support it. Here's why. The first reason is that the filibuster is not actually constitutional. The voters never voted in favor of the filibuster. It's not something that was, I'm not saying it's unconstitutional. I'm saying it's not part of the Constitution. The people who passed the Constitution, they never imagined that we would have the filibuster the way we have it today. They could have done that. They could have made that part of the Constitution. They could have said, in order to pass a bill, you need to have 60 votes in the Senate, but they didn't do that. Now, they did for certain issues. They actually did make supermajority the requirement for things like impeachment and for various other kinds of things. Treaties is another one. And there are other things. If you want to pass a constitutional amendment, you need a supermajority. It's not enough to just have a simple majority in the Senate to get the job done. But when it comes to just run-of-the-mill legislation, it was supposed to be a simple majority. The founding fathers were actually very clear about this. They were opposed to supermajorities being used as a way of keeping legislation from getting past, ordinary legislation. We want a government that's representative of the people. If people are voting in politicians, they want things to get done. The idea was not to create a system where nothing would ever be accomplished, good or bad. The idea was to have a government that is representative of what the people want. And that's not what we have right now, in large part because of the filibuster. How do I know that this is the position that they took? I know it because James Madison went on record saying something to that effect. Alexander Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers about this. I can't remember what paper it was. Maybe it was 22. I can't remember. But in the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton wrote an appeal to the American people about all sorts of different things. But one of the things that he said was that we don't want to have supermajorities preventing legislation from being passed. Prior to the Constitution, the United States, after they won the Revolutionary War, was operating under something called the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation made it really, really difficult for legislation to get passed because the 13 different states, colonies, that were becoming states were treated almost like little countries. It was like a confederation of countries. It was more similar to that than it was one singular nation with this sort of federalist model that we have in the wake of the Constitution. And having seen that and seen how impossible it was to get anything done, because in a lot of cases, a single state could stop anything from being accomplished, even if the vast majority of states wanted something to occur. Even if the vast majority of Americans wanted something to happen, one state or two states could end it. Having seen that be a failure, they didn't want to create a model that would make it impossible or near impossible for legislation to be passed. So they designed the Senate to have to be a simple majority system. It's the Senate itself. It's the elites in the Senate that decided this was a good idea because they had it's sort of a club for really powerful people. And they like a lot of them are friends with each other, and they like the idea of having this endless battle with each other where nothing ever really gets accomplished. That's what they like. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. That's what they like. And this is why the Senate has been operating this way for more than a century. I use the word boys club. It's not really a boys club. There are women there too, obviously, but it's an insider club. It's like a country club over there in the Senate. And frankly, a lot of them don't want to get things done. They just don't. Now, some of them do. I'm not saying everyone in the Senate is bad or terrible or doesn't want to accomplish things or wants the filibuster to be there forever, but a lot of people do. And they like the constant political theater and wrangling and debates and everything that has to happen as a result of the filibuster. Personally, I think it's a disaster. I don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think that it's helpful for the country. Okay, so in my article for the Federalist, I make that case, but I go into other things too. It's not just that this wasn't how the system was designed and this isn't what the voters wanted. But from a limited government perspective, it's worth noting that although it's true that the filibuster makes it really hard to get legislation passed, therefore, a lot of bad ideas, you can stop a lot of bad ideas from happening. Although that's true, it's also true that you can't get good ideas through the door either. And that includes passing legislation that would tear down some of the unnecessary and in some cases, I would argue, unconstitutional power structures that have been put into place by Congress over the last century and a half. Okay, so it's really hard to make government smaller with the filibuster because now you need at least a percentage of the Democrats, most of whom want government to keep getting larger, to come along and say, yeah, we'll vote for a smaller government. In the vast majority of cases, they're not going to do that. What we have seen over the course of history is that government has increasingly gotten larger with the filibuster being in place. We have almost no example of Congress taking meaningful steps to reduce the size of government over the past century. There's been some little blips here or there, but overall, the trend has been government keeps getting larger, government spending keeps going up, government debt keeps going up. As a result, the economy continues to be reliant more and more on debt. We have more and more money printing, more and more personal debt. And that we have more and more inflation. All of these things have been problems, and it has been getting exponentially worse over time. We don't see the filibuster system resulting in government getting smaller. So the model from a conservative limited government perspective, it doesn't work in our favor. This isn't speculation. This is just based on the past 100 years of looking at data. We can tell this model doesn't work. So that's one of the things that I argue in the piece at length. Another really important thing. So what I would say is this. It's to summarize that point and really put an exclamation point on it. It's not possible from a limited government perspective, in my opinion, to fix the massive problems that this country has without ending the filibuster. Because without ending the filibuster, we can't get the legislation through that we need to get through to fix the country. The other thing is that over time, both the left and the right, because they can't get anything passed in the Senate that's meaningful other than through these gigantic omnibus bills that are full of pork and all this other garbage, they turn to executive orders and executive action. So presidents have become increasingly more powerful in large part because of the filibuster. Because the people want something to get done, they're willing to look the other way and allow presidents to become increasingly more powerful so that at least something happens. But if we didn't have a filibuster, then Congress could do more. And maybe there wouldn't be so much pressure on presidents and a rubber stamp from the people to say, you know what, president, you were elected, just get things done. Yeah, I know Congress is supposed to be doing this, but Congress isn't getting the job done. So the president's got to do something. If we didn't have the filibuster, that wouldn't be necessary. Yes, lots of bad legislation would get through that ordinarily wouldn't get through, but a lot of good legislation would get through as well. And ultimately, the point of Congress should be to pass legislation. It shouldn't be to hold things up forever so that nothing gets done except for this really slow, steady growth of the Leviathan. We have government growing and growing and growing and growing over time, and the American people are essentially the frog in the boiling pot where they don't notice the water getting hotter and hotter and hotter. The country is circling down the drain, but it's happening so slowly that we don't realize it. That's not helpful. And there's no way for us to fix it because we have the filibuster. And it's completely self-imposed. We could get rid of it tomorrow if we wanted, but we won't because we want to keep the status quo, even though the status quo has not been good for pro-liberty people. This to me makes no sense. A final point, there's a lot of arguments I make. You can check out the article. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, the Federalist article. But one of the main arguments I make towards the end is that Democrats have repeatedly signaled, left-wing people, far left-wing people have repeatedly signaled that they're going to do all of these different things that would require ending the filibuster. And they've threatened repeatedly to end the filibuster when they come into power. So it's sort of like, if you really do believe that the Democrats, the far left, is eventually going to end the filibuster to get the things done that they want to do, then why wouldn't Republicans do it first and actually get good things into place that will make the country better while we have the power to do it? And maybe convince people in the process, hey, conservatives have really good ideas. They can get things done. Vote for us. Instead, they're going to wait for the far left to have the ability to do this. That doesn't make any sense. So let me give you some examples of things that Democrats have said they're going to do that would require ending the filibuster. And that some Democrats have openly said that, yeah, they want to end the filibuster. One example is Democrats in Congress have said they want Washington, D.C. to become a state. This would add 2 Senate seats that are hard left Senate seats into the mix and make it really hard for Republicans, really hard for Republicans to control the Senate. Democrats have said they want to do that. Democrats in Congress have also proposed packing the Supreme Court, because now the Democrats don't control the left doesn't control the Supreme Court, not the Democrats, but the left doesn't control the Supreme Court. So they want more Supreme Court seats. They've been very open about that. We're going to add seats to the Supreme Court. Well, the only way you can add seats to the Supreme Court is by getting rid of the filibuster. Adding a, quote, public option for health insurance or a single payer healthcare system. Forgiving hundreds of billions of dollars or even all student loan debt. More than $1 trillion worth. I think it's up to like 1.7, 1.8 trillion dollars. They want to get rid of that. Destroying the oil and gas industry, creating the Green New Deal. And there's a million other things too. Democrats keep saying they're going to do these things. All of them require ending the filibuster. Some on the far left have openly said, yep, we're going to end the filibuster first chance we get. And Republicans are just sitting on their hands. Conservatives are just sitting on their hands and they're saying, well, it'll never happen. They're telling you it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Now, maybe it won't happen soon. Maybe the Democrats in the Senate won't get the votes either, because there are people like John Fetterman and some others, senator from Pennsylvania, some of the more moderate senators who say, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. They like this system that exists the way it is now. But to that, I would say it's just a matter of time, number one. And number two, as I pointed out earlier, of course they like it. It benefits their side. As I've shown, or as I pointed out, over the past century, has government continued to grow even with the filibuster in place? Yes. Has government spending continued to grow? Has debt continued to grow? Have we shrunk the size of government and the power of government? Have presidents become increasingly more powerful over the past century? And even going back further than that? Yes. So is this system working for us? For limited government people that want to shrink the size of the federal government and give more power and authority to the states? No, it's not good for us. Is it good for those of us who believe in a balanced budget? No. The reality is, if we want to fix the country, there is only one way to fix the country, and that's by getting rid of the filibuster. Yes, it means that when the left comes into power, they're going to put lots of things into effect that we may not agree with. That's a very real possibility. But the alternative is we end up going down this road very, very slowly, but the destination is the same. It's just how long does it take to get there? There's no way to fix our problems with the filibuster still in place. I know that this isn't a popular view with everybody. There's a lot of people on the right, a lot of people that say this is a terrible idea. Justin, I can't believe you're taking this position. You're an idiot. You're stupid. Well, I don't know if anybody's called me stupid, but you get the idea. Yeah, this is not something we should do. I get it. A lot of people are worried what will happen if the other side takes this and runs with it. It's going to happen anyway. So we might as well put the policies in place that make the country a better place while we have the chance. And just another thing, people get the government in the long run, maybe not in from one election to the next, but in the long run, people get the government that they deserve. They should, at least. So if the American people decide that they want these crazy left-wing programs, then maybe that's what should happen. I know that's an unpopular position. I get it. But that's how the system was set up. The reason we keep having this hyper-partisan environment, one of the reasons for it, and one of the reasons that people are so dissatisfied with Congress year after year after year, one of the reasons why we keep switching presidents in terms of their party affiliation and their ideology, one reason we keep switching Congress and who's in control of Congress, which party that is, every 2 to 4 years, the reason this keeps happening over and over and over again is because people are unhappy with the way Congress is operating. And the reason they're unhappy, the core reason, is because nothing gets done. And the reason nothing gets done is because of the filibuster. So it's time to kill the filibuster once and for all. Let's end it. While conservatives have some power in Congress and can actually get things done to make the country a better place and shrink the size and power of government and move more of the decision-making to the state and local level, which ultimately will make everybody happier, even people on the left. Let Portland be Portland. Let Texas be Texas. Let people have the government they want. That's what we should be aiming for. That's what freedom looks like. Freedom does not look like the system we have now, where a very small group, relative to the size of this country, of 100 people play politics endlessly and never get anything done other than every once in a while passing a gigantic omnibus bill that's full of a bunch of handouts and unnecessary government spending and all kinds of policies that's 2,000 pages long and no one can read it. That's the system we have now, and it's broken. And we need a change. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. We're going to wrap it up now, but leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you support the filibuster, you support ending the filibuster. Maybe there's a hybrid model. Maybe instead of getting rid of the filibuster entirely, we make it 55 votes instead of 60 votes to end debate. There's lots of different ways that we could do this, or even 53 votes. I don't know. Maybe there's something I haven't thought of. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Convince me I'm wrong. Leave a comment, and I'll go through the comments. I'll read them all as I do, and I will genuinely take it into consideration if you make a good argument. So please take the time to do that. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, that's it for today's show. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. My name is Justin Haskins. Until next time, please stay free.